In my last video I made these intricate pattern veneers. They came out great and they weren't too difficult to make, although they were definitely time consuming. In this video I'll use them on a more substantial project. I'll make and cover this coffee table, which seems straightforward enough, but I can tell you I made a number of mistakes along the way. Anyway, let's get into it, and I'll start by cutting some circles for the top, and to do that I'll use my trim router with a circle cutting jig that I made from a scrap of plywood. If you're working on a project and you don't have the right jig, don't let everything come to a stop. Quite often it's easy enough just to grab a piece of scrap and make a quick jig that will do the job. 9 times out of 10 there's an easy way to do it. I'll lower the bit and make a second pass, and I could keep going until I get all the way through, but I prefer to cut it out with a jigsaw and finish it with a pattern following bit on the router table. Like most things with woodworking, there's usually a few ways to get to the same outcome by using a variety of tools, from machinery to power tools and then to hand tools. But one way or another, only having basic tools shouldn't stop you from giving it a go. I left it overnight to set, then trimmed the second layer flush with the first. I'll use all of the patterns, and to work out the overall design I'll lay them out until I find something that I think looks right. I like that and I think it works. The only thing is, looking through this way it's too symmetrical. These are too similar in size, so I'm going to shift the whole thing this way and make it less even. I think that looks pretty good with a nice balance, so I'll mark it out and start gluing down the tiles. I'm not really sure how this is going to look. It'll be pretty busy. It's probably not the general style I would usually go for, but the main reason for the whole project is the challenge from making the veneers and now hopefully laying the tiles down seamlessly without any trace of them. I just enjoy trying things out and pushing myself. Anyway, I reckon it'll be an item that you'll either love or hate, and I'm sure some of you will like it. You'll have to let me know at the end. And don't worry, even if I'm not 100% sure about it, I'm totally into the project and I'm really enjoying it. Now that I've sanded the furry bits off the ends, I'm ready to glue them down. I'm using regular wood glue, and to hold them in place I'll use a bone folder and press them down until the glue takes. This works very well and the veneer holds after about 20 seconds or so. I'm doing the dividing border pieces first, and that's to get the pattern down and establish the main areas. So far it's going well and it's easy enough. That's the pattern laid out, so I'll sand the edges of the next tiles and then start to fill it in. These were the worst tiles I made and the pattern is a bit wonky, especially down the one side, but hopefully it'll still look good and effective when it's done. I could trim the tiles off here and they'd look pretty good, but there wouldn't be enough to fill the table. If they all go into place that easy, this will be a breeze. It isn't going as well as I thought, and there's a bit of a problem. The overall pattern made up of the collective tiles isn't lining up, which you can see in this area here. So instead of laying them down in a random pattern like I have been, I'll start laying them in rows, and hopefully this should keep the pattern in line. Doing them in rows wasn't much better. The pattern's still misaligning. It's better at this end where it starts out, but it gradually gets worse towards the other end. The tiles vary too much in length, and that's from when I cut them into slices on the bandsaw. The thickness of the tiles is inconsistent from one end to the other, which eventually made the block a slightly wedge shape, and that resulted in the tiles getting longer. I did start flipping the block 180 degrees after each cut, but not until it was too late for this pattern. What I think I really need for this type of thing is a better bandsaw. But anyway, there's nothing I can do, so I'm just going to keep going and use them as they are. Because of how intricate the top's going to be, I'll be making the legs much more subdued to try and bring the whole thing down a bit so it isn't shouting at you. They'll be simple and made from steel, and you could take the design and put them on any coffee table, and I reckon they'd look good. Anyway, I've got a bit of a way to go until I get to the legs. I just thought I'd tell you what the plan was. That's the first segment done. I don't have enough tiles left over to fill in the opposite section, so I'll cut a few more and do that next. It doesn't look bad, and the pattern mostly lines up. The worst section was the first row, but after that it's much better. Anyway, nothing I can do about it now as I don't have enough tiles left to replace that row. I hadn't fully thought this pattern through. I knew I was going to have to do some trimming, but if I trim the edge of that off there to get it to fit the border, I'm going to have the stars or the flowers right up against the border, which I don't want. I'd rather have it in this position. So instead, I've got a bunch of spare ones that didn't cut real well, and I'm going to cut those sections off and glue them in. I'm not sure how well these tiles are going to line up, but hopefully I don't get too many problems. This pattern went pretty well with no issues. The thickness varies a lot, so there'll be a fair amount of sanding, and that's from cutting the tiles on my little bandsaw, which was a bad idea. I should have used my bigger bandsaw, which I mentioned in my last video. Anyway, on to the last pattern, which should be super quick and easy, as these tiles are by far the most consistent. That was the easiest one so far, but stupidly I made an error, which I knew perfectly well about, but forgot. The tiles have an orientation. They should be laid with the aluminium or the brass points facing in a certain direction. I should have arranged them the same way, but I put them down randomly, which may give away the formation of the tiles. Nothing I can do about it now though, so anyway, these are the tiles that are left over. There's not too many, but enough for a few small projects. Next I'll trim the edge flush, which up until now I hadn't worked out how to go about it. There are a few pieces coming away, but this method is working okay, so I'll keep going and I'll fix up the missing pieces afterwards. I mentioned in my last video about a new product that I've been testing and developing. It's Bondi Bond, a CA glue, which I've been using heaps and I really like it. If you'd like to get on the wait list, you'll get savings on pre-launch prices coming soon. Next I'll put some edging around the outside. I like this scrap of brush box, so I'll use that and cut some more strips from this old floorboard. I've purposely left it a bit thick so I can put it through the drum sander, then test it to see if it bends okay. If not, I'll take another sanding pass and try again until it bends well without any chance of it snapping. There'll be 3 legs, so I'll mark out their positions now. I can then place the joints between the strips on those marks, which will get mostly covered up by the legs. The only part that will be visible is the top edging of the strip. I'll glue 2 on first. When they've set, I'll cut the last strip to fit and glue that on afterwards. I was having a problem. Whatever I did, I couldn't keep the joint together. The band clamp was pulling them away from each other. I needed to be quick before the glue started to go off, so I decided to live with it and fix it up later. Now that's done, I can start sanding, and because some of the tiles are pretty uneven, this is going to take a while, so I'll put an audio book on and get into it. There's a few pieces missing here and there. I always knew about them, but before I go any further, I'll fix them up. They're super easy to do. Just cut a triangle, a bit of CA glue and press it in, and once it's sanded, you'd never know. It would actually be very easy to replace any part of the pattern if it was needed. I'll also fix up that edging before I start sanding again. There's a few slight gaps which need filling, and to do that I'll mix up sawdust and glue. The gaps are between the tiles, which is all black wattle. I'm using the mix as it will be dark and will match pretty well. Even the darkest filler I have, I think, would show up. To thin it slightly, I'm adding a few drops of water which will help push it into the gaps. When the filler had gone off, I flipped the table over and flushed the edging with the underneath. I'm only showing a small amount of the sanding because who really wants to watch that? I did spend hours though going through the grits to get a good flat finish. I couldn't make my mind up on the finish, and in the end I plumped for hard wax oil. It looked okay, but not amazing, and I'm worried if it has enough protection. There was also a spot that needed gluing down, but that was easy enough to fix. Also, it's revealed a few patches where I haven't quite sanded enough and the glue's still infused into the grain. I've decided to sand it back though and spray it with clear coat to give it better protection. I recently made a guitar and I used this for the finish. I really liked it. It dries fast and it's a super durable finish. I built up the layers sanding between coats. I have no idea how many I put on, but it was a lot. Anyway, I'm not super keen on how glossy it is, so I'm going to finish it with a satin clear spray. I reckon that's come out pretty good, so now I'll move on to the legs, which I'll make from 50 by 12mm or 2 by 1/2 inch steel flat bar. I could cut and weld these in no time, but I'll forge them to add some character and make them more interesting. The first thing after marking them out is forge a corner, which I've never done before, but always wanted to try. The length of the bar is a bit awkward to hold with tongs and too hot to hold even with welding gloves on, so I'm cooling the end down while it heats up. The first operation is to fold it back on itself using the centre punch mark to line up the bend. After it's folded, I forge a 90-degree point on the end, which will become the corner after I open the end back up. Forging is all about moving material, and if you just bent the bar 90 degrees, it would have a radius corner. Going through this process, the material is moving into that point, making a corner. That's the plan anyhow. Like I said, cutting and welding would have been so much easier. I left plenty on the end, so next I'll cut those off and then put them back in the forge to make a second bend. I'm doing a bit of finessing and chamfering the edges to clean it up a bit. They're not identical, but they're close enough and they'll be positioned far enough apart to eliminate any comparison. After cleaning off the scale, I don't like where it transitions into the original factory scale, so I'll put the foot end into the forge to even up the finish and also soften up the rest of the edges with a chamfer. I just need to grind a bevel for the feet so they sit better on the floor. I made these tabs off camera, which will fit the legs to the table. I just need to weld them on. I'll blacken them with super glue, and after washing them down and letting them dry, I'll finish them with a few coats of clear coat. time to flip it over and take a look. I have to say it looks so much better than I thought it would. I honestly didn't think it was going to be my cup of tea, but I absolutely love it, and so did the family, and I can even live with all the errors. I have a dilemma though. I still love the Kumiko coffee table that I built a few years ago, which is on the screen now. I don't know which one will live in the lounge. Which one would you choose? Because I'm really unsure. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.